day, and welcome to our Answers Weekly Apps. As usual, what we'll do is a sort of a macroeconomic segment and then end up with a tech/AI segment. In this week's macro segment, we'll firstly cover the executive orders of Donald Trump. Then we're going to look at inflation locally. And then in our tech segment, we're going to discuss the Stargate project, announced by Donald Trump and Sam Altman, as well as a couple other luminaries in the tech and in business space. So starting off with the executive orders for Trump. As promised, Trump came out and signed a number of executive orders. Some of them are pretty, influential things, and some of them are more like, iffy. Like one of them was basically, bring inflation down, without actually saying exactly how to do it, but just bring inflation down, which obviously has no impact. But some other stuff is not just impactful, but it's stuff that people weren't even considering possible before Trump came into power. One of which was he basically took or rescinded and replaced the executive order of Lyndon B. Johnson around, protections for different classes of people. So Lyndon B. Johnson was the president after, which was JFK was murdered. And people may not realize it, but he was one of the most influential presidents in US history. He's much of what the modern US looks like was because of him, especially around the civil rights movement. And he had an order, executive order in place that basically ensured that, there was no discrimination in terms of hiring and so on. But he made it, and his next guy's successor, which was Richard Nixon, interpreted it in a way that made it very powerful. So the way it works in the US is not only can you not discriminate, actively, but if it's shown that something has a disparate impact. So for instance, you do a test, for whatever reason, women do better on the test than men. You have to show that that test is absolutely necessary in order for that test to be used for something, because the impact of the test is different between different groups that are protected. So by rescinding this order and by changing this, he's basically going after something that's been around for about 60 years, around which massive amounts of not just government, but anyone that contracts with government, anyone that does dealings with government, have built a business around. This will impact basically the US government, it will impact the supplies to the US government, and have ripple effects throughout the entire economy. Other things that he did, for instance, was declare the cartels of Mexico as a terrorist organization. Why is that important? Because if you're a terrorist organization, post 2001, September 11th, there's a whole slew of powers that the government can do to target you, especially around financial operations. And this means that there were things that the US government could not do to the cartels before that they can do. Obviously now they don't do this as much, but things like Guantanamo Bay, waterboarding, remember that, to some very aggressive kind of questioning tactics. You can't just take a person or drug dealer off the street and basically torture them effectively. You can do that to a terrorist according to US law. And you can now do those things to the cartel members. There's also been a move to change birthright citizenship. I don't think this will go through because it's literally part, I think it's the 14th Amendment in the US, where if you're born in the US, you become a US citizen. Doesn't matter if your mother's plane was stopping over from a trip, from Mexico to Canada and just had a layover in the US, you get born in the US, you're American. It doesn't matter if your mother walked across the Rio Grande River and gave birth to you, even though she's an illegal alien, you're a US citizen. And so that is a very fundamental change to the way the law works. People that would not be US citizens right now include people like Kamala Harris according to this law. But like I said, it's part of the Constitution, unlikely to go forward dramatically. But a number of other things are coming into play around Trump's executive orders. And the one thing I wanted to point out that was important about this, beyond the the different aspects I talked about, the salacious aspects about changing citizenship, etc., is that this is a level of efficiency, competence, one might say, that we did not see in the first Trump administration. This is not how the first Trump administration behaved. 90 days in, they did basically nothing. They couldn't get anything done. There was stymied by every government agency. There's evidence that government agencies lied to them outright, saying that they couldn't do certain things that they were allowed to do in order to stop them from acting. The first administration was staffed by a number of people that were part of the establishment of the Washington, D.C., or the business world, that were much less conservative, much less radical than what Trump wanted to be, and basically they stopped most of the things he wanted to do getting done. He's already done like more in the first like 2 days or so than you would have seen in Biden doing for like multiple years. The amount of executive orders he's pushed through, the amount of change he's made to the U.S. government, the amount of change he's made to the U.S. Staggering the world and the economy as well. This already, if he did nothing else, for the next couple of years, would be one of the most impactful starts to a U.S. presidency ever. So what I'm saying to you is that don't think Trump 1 is what Trump 2 looks like. It's a very different situation. And some people argue, in fact, that the fact that he had that break of 4 years was actually negative, because what it did was it gave him, firstly, the willingness to be more radical than he had been in the past, but also gave him the ability to build up or assemble a team of people that are willing to do what he wants them to do. Had he gone from basically, the first term to the second term in 2020, he wouldn't have had the ability to go and bring in people into the administration like Elon Musk, etc. He wouldn't have the ability to go and radically change, some of the, or the willingness to radically change some of the people in the key positions in his government. With that 4-year break, he's done that, and he's also developed plans in that 4-year period that are, obviously with some experience that he's probably built up in the first term he's had, as to how exactly he wants to implement that going into the next administration, into the current administration. And I think that, be prepared for a lot more uncertainty about in the world than you had seen in the past, especially around the US, because, like I said, I would think that the biggest thing he's done so far has probably been that rescinding of Lyndon B. Johnson's executive order around discrimination in the federal government, because the federal government in the US is a massive organization. And not just internally, but when anyone applies to them, they also have to fulfill these requirements as well. If you look at all these people that are hired by the US government, all the people that work with the US government, and some estimates in total that all people that work in all areas of government, from local to statewide to federal government, it exceeds 50% of the population. Those people are now going to be affected, at least the ones working in federal government, by this. It's going to affect things like, for instance, universities, in terms of hiring practices, in terms of affirmative action. Even though affirmative action has been banned, but now it makes it not just basically illegal to have affirmative action. Any kind of discrimination based on this, on race, is now illegal. You can't basically. There's ways that you could go around affirmative action. Over the last couple of years that have been developed, a lot of that stuff is going to be illegal going forward. So yeah, very important move there. The next thing is what's happening with regards to inflation. We had our inflation number coming out slightly higher, 3%, so we're back technically within the target range of 3 to 6% in Africa. But I think going forward, we need to be a little concerned about the South African economy in terms of inflation, because we're seeing petrol prices rise again. We are seeing, some of the base effects of last year disappear. So one of the reasons we saw, inflation was not as bad at the end of last year as it is right, and was before that, was because, when prices go up a lot in 1 year, it's hard for them to go up by the same amount the next year. So if you basically double prices over the last, say, 2 years, the third year you're probably not going to have prices go up again, double again. You might even have it stay flat to go down slightly, because prices have already increased by so much. And I think to a certain extent that is going away. We are starting to see a diminishment of some of those base effects, and we are, like I say, seeing things like oil prices recover. We are seeing things like, for instance, tariffs probably rising globally, which is also going to be negative for prices as well. So I think inflation at 3% might not be basically where it's going to be for the rest of the year. I think we are probably going to see a upward tick in inflation, and if that is the case, then we're going to see a drop in expectations around what's happening with regards to interest rate changes. So of course, we have our interest rate announcement coming out soon. I think that we don't be surprised if in this year we don't get as many interest rate cuts as we had previously been hoping for. Next, moving on to our tech segment. Announcement made this week with Sal Altman from OpenAI, as well as Ray Ellison from Oracle, and Masayoshi Son from SoftBank. SoftBank, I think people know OpenAI by now. If you have listened to any of my presentations before, you have an idea of OpenAI, the leader in the AI space, ChatGPT and that stuff. Oracle, I'm sure most of you guys have heard of Oracle as well. Massive data based company. Most of the databases run globally, or many of the databases run globally, are based on their in technology. A lot of companies basically run their entire systems on Oracle. And then Masatoshi Son, people may not know that, but he is basically a guy has a company called SoftBank, huge investor, made some big investments in the past. I think the most famous one was like Alibaba, huge returns on those stocks. And I do think that they are a sizable group of people. But the announcement they made was gigantic. They were looking at a $500 billion investment in AI over the next few years. To give you an idea what $500 billion is, that's about 40% of South Africa's entire GDP. If the South African government wanted to take all the revenue it collects in any given year, it would not be able to get up to like a third of $500 billion. It'll take, even in 3 years' time, it would not, if every cent the South African government collected for the next 3 years went towards trying to do something like this here, they could not do it. That's the kind of size we're talking about. Now, Elon Musk has come out and said that he doesn't think they have the money for this. But what he was people pointed out is that Microsoft is backing OpenAI, and Microsoft is planning to spend $80 billion per year for this couple of years on Azure and other AI infrastructure. And as Satya Nadella came out and says, I'm good for the 80 billion on my side. If you put 80 billion from Satya Nadella and Microsoft, you don't need much more than double that to get to the 500 billion in a couple of years' time anyway. And I think that is what the amazing thing about this announcement is. It's firstly, it nothing that you can imagine costs $500 billion. You could build unbelievable things with $500 billion. And the fact that this is going towards training and running AI shows that we are seeing a huge amount of confidence among these individuals with regards to AI going forward. Now, I've always said with AI, the one thing that's going to derail this train is going to be when we hit a wall, where the new technologies that we have don't scale just because you're adding more money or adding more computing power. There has been fears over the last little while, especially looking at the last few versions of things like Grok, etc., where everybody was able to catch up with GPT-4 and come within very close distance of GPT-4. Even someone like Elon Musk with Grok, which just started from zero to Grok 2 in like a year. Grok 2, by most estimates, is very hard to distribution that in the GPT-4 unless you do some very hard testing. Now, the important factor here is that there's asymmetric information in the AI space. I don't know what's happening there. I definitely think the majority of people have no idea what's happening within these big companies. But the people that do know what's happening in big companies are people like Satya Nadella, are people like Larry Ellison. They are actually in the space that is, where they can actually see behind the scenes, where they can actually see what's been happening, what's progressing or not. And if they are out there willing to spend this kind of money, it's, I think, a very good indicator that we are not likely to see a wall emerge at the moment. The example I use is Satya Nadella. He runs Microsoft, one of the biggest companies in the world, top 3. He's rich, he's very well regarded. He's basically, Bill Gates took Microsoft from zero to, a very good company. Then there was a period where Steve Ballmer, Bill Gates' second in charge, took over. And in that period, they stopped at virtually nothing. In fact, fell slightly in that period. But since Satya Nadella has taken over, that stock price has gone up multiple times. It's created, a couple $1 trillion worth of value. He's by any measure one of the great CEOs of the last decade plus. He basically has that reputation. He's gotten huge stock payments. So he's basically set for life in terms of money. He's set for life in terms of reputation. The one thing that could derail his reputation is basically investing $80 billion into something that doesn't work out. Okay? So he has no incentive to go and basically have false bravado around towards AI. Sam Altman does, that's all he has. He has an AI company, he wants to push it forward. Nadella does not. But Nadella, who can see what's happening behind OpenAI's doors, because he has access to all the IP that OpenAI has, who has investments in virtually every AI company out there, is willing to bet $80 billion, not just $80 billion, but also his reputation on this technology. So the guy that knows or should know more than anybody else is willing to take the biggest bet out there. And that makes me believe that this technology is going to be going forward at a startling pace this year. And I can't wait to see what Grok Free, etc., looks like in the next couple of months, because I fully expect that we are going to be seeing, like, abilities in the next year, by 2026, early 2026, that are going to be truly amazing, even beyond what we've seen already. Okay, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to speaking to you guys again next week. Cheers.